What is up? Welcome to the first episode of the MystxTD podcast. I'm Myst, and here we have TD. And so right now it is 11:08 Eastern Time. We're going to be doing a bit of a live reaction to the Wizards Celtics game that's on right now. We're going to be a bit watching that. We're going to be talking about a bit about the play-in tournament in general, kind of our thoughts on that, and I think at the end we'll segue into the MVP conversation. So I mean, you look at this game so far. I mean, it's somewhat close at the time we're listening in. I think it's middle of the fourth quarter. Celtics have a bit of a 10-point lead, and Tatum's just playing amazing. I mean, you look at his stats; he's just balling out to say the least. So I mean, yeah. What are your thoughts on the game so far?
I mean, I had the Wizards coming in and winning this one easily, especially considering the absence of Jaylen Brown and how they performed without him. But not only Jason Tatum, but I mean, seeing 23 points out of Kemba. I mean, if this is a couple years ago, this would be expected. But as we know, Kemba, he's been on a bit of a decline with the Celtics. It's just nice to see him step up um, as Jaylen Brown goes down, and now they have another second contributor to really step in with Jason Tatum. Um, I mean, if you're getting 45 from Tatum, 25 from Kemba, um, you kind of just got to expect that the role players um, do the rest for you at that point. I mean, Kemba and Tatum's offense is enough to carry this team. And if they can play like this, like they can still go deeper in the playoffs than I originally thought.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think a lot of the issues for the Celtics team was in the beginning of the year. I think when they were missing Tatum, it was scoring points, and when they were missing Brown, it was just like that extra two-way chip. But I mean, with Kemba, he's been inconsistent, but now he's finding that second layer of consistency. 23 points at the moment, and then I mean, you're right. Like the bench factor from this team, like the guys off the bench are huge. I think definitely a guy to mention is Tristan Thompson, who has 9 points, 10 rebounds, 4 offensive boards, and no real other stats other than that, but it's just almost basically a double double at that point. And I mean, you just have to say like, wow, that's such a huge contributor. Even if it's not a huge scoring contribution, just think about those 4 offensive rebounds probably translate into a bunch of points. And based on the way the game is right now, those points are definitely going to matter.
And I mean, especially like Tristan Thompson's a great pickup, but like even if you look at a guy who doesn't jump out in the stat sheet like Evan Fournier, I mean he's got 8, 4, and 6 right now. Um, I mean Evan Fournier, Tristan Thompson, you got Grant and Robert Williams off the bench. Um, the thing with this team is that they lose guys to injuries, but like adding like Evan Fournier is a player who can kind of step in, not fill the Jaylen Brown role, but Evan Fournier can definitely give you good minutes starting at that shooting guard position. I think that was a huge pickup for them.
Yeah, and I mean, another key stat that you definitely have to highlight right now is turnovers, where the Celtics only have 9, but the Wizards have 15, 4 from Westbrook. And as much as I was wishing that the Wizards could keep this hot streak going, especially with Russ, it just has not been going their way. Rusty's been having an amazing past few games, but just looking like luck has run out for them. And then another guy who just having a poor performance tonight, Davis Bertans, 0 of 6 from 3. Then it's just disappointing because you look at what Russell Westbrook has done to this team, and then on the one night where he's just not really shooting efficiently, they just can't get enough offense around him to finish the job, and it sucks. And I mean, yeah, at this point, it really is looking like the Celtics are running away with it. It's 106-88. 18. That's five. You end just 5.5 minutes left. It's really looking like it's over, which sucks. It's my first incorrect prediction, but I mean, as much as it does suck for the Wizards, I do expect them to secure the 8th seed over the Pacers. At least I would think, assuming that you can get a good enough game out of Russell Westbrook. But I mean, who really knows at that point?
I mean, just in general, not even just Davis Bertans, but the Wizards are just not shooting well right now. I mean, they're 3 for 19 from three. Um, the thing with the Wizards offense is that they, if they're not shooting well, I mean, they're a team that can get to the paint with
Yeah, exactly. I mean, going into the season, I mean, once you heard the John Wall Russell Westbrook trade, I think a lot of people would say like, yeah, this is definitely injury free. This team could probably be maybe maybe a 4 or 5 seed at its peak. Definitely not at its floor. It was probably missing the playoffs by just a bit, and they're at risk of hitting that floor right now. They're nowhere near the ceiling. I mean, their ceiling is kind of on the condition that Russell Westbrook has an amazing year all around, and he really only was able to pick it up in the second half of the season. But I mean, if Russell Westbrook was able to pick it up a bit earlier, that would have just been amazing for them. Sadly, he wasn't, but I guess they're somewhere in the middle of their between their floor and their ceiling compared to where they were predicted at the beginning of the season. And it's just a bit disappointing to see that they aren't able to get all the way up to their ceiling because the injuries as well as Russell Westbrook just having to take some time to get into it. I mean, the very early injury to Thomas Bryant was absolutely awful for them. They had to pick up Daniel Gafford at the trade deadline, who by no means has been a bad pickup, but they had to give up Mo Wagner for him, who I think they definitely would have liked to keep. They also and then they're starting guys like Alex Len. They're playing Robin Lopez, who I don't think anyone wants to play in a playoff game. And I mean,
No Alex Lender.
all right.
We keep that free on this podcast.
I
Alex
mean,
Lender's
he's had a
questionable.
solid season so far. It's just like
He's
it's
chucking tonight though.
yeah, no, tonight's just has not been his night. I mean, he's yeah, 2 of 8 from the field. It's just
He's
disappointing.
missing a lot of easy takes.
Yeah,
And even
exactly.
with Beal, like if you look at Beal, Beal's not a player. He's not like a Tatum, Kobe, like D book esque player. Like he doesn't. He honestly, like if you look at game, it's a lot simpler. Um, when you actually look at it, you know, a lot of coming off screens, like off the ball, Horns action on the ball. Beal's not a guy that takes a lot of difficult shots. And for Beal to be shooting, 40% on a playing game on not easy shots, but shots that aren't too relatively difficult, I mean, that kind of just shoots yourself in the foot. And I mean, especially when you look at Westbrook, well, when I looked, I think he was like 5 for 17. Oh no, he just hit another one like just now. So he's 6 for 18. Um, I think the big issue with the Wizards and any Russell Westbrook team is efficiency. Um, and I think that's something they're going to have to fix. If they even get out of the playing game into the playoffs, they're going to have to try to find more efficient forms of offense coming from this team.
Yeah, and I feel like that's going to be something that they're going to want to try and go after in the offseason. And I wonder how they would go about doing that. I mean, you can always try and go after a guy like, I don't even really know, but like there are definitely enough players to go out and try and get. I just wonder like what they try and do this offseason. I wonder how exactly they're going to try and go about that. I mean, is it going to be through the trade market? Are they going to try and sign some guy? Are they going to like heavily push after a trade up in the draft to keep building this young core around Russell Westbrook? I mean, I would definitely try and sign some guy on a mid level exception. I would be willing to go into the tax if I'm the Wizards right now, just because I feel like you have the opportunity. If you can put some really good guys, you can really make a run at the. I think if you keep Russell Westbrook around in this situation and he keeps up the level of play, maybe not at the same level of consistency, but I think you'll have if you get yourself in the right situation, you'll be a 4 or 5 seed, or maybe even a 6 seed. But you'll be at a point at which you have 7 games. You don't have just one, which is I think what might be I guess like the final falling for this team. So I guess that's like my big issue. Like, what do you do if if it's like you're really like you think you're screwed, like you really just don't know what you're supposed to do at that point, and then you're like, all right, well, if we go after a guy in free agency, we actually have a chance at maybe if we go after the right guy in free agency. I haven't really looked at this class just yet, but if you go after the right guy in free agency, what do you get from there? And if you can get the right player, are you willing to go into luxury tax to get that? Are you willing to part ways with some other guys who you might not want to get that done? And it'll be a question for the front office this season, but I think they'll definitely make the right decision. I think the right decision will probably be to get a guy in free agency because I don't think they have a lot of draft picks or a lot of draft capital to give up. But I think I think there's really no wrong way to go when trying to improve a team. So yeah.
I mean, I definitely think like you look at what they need most is the wing shooting. They drafted Denny and Villa, who I actually coming out of the draft, I said many times I thought he was the most NBA ready out of all the top prospects. I thought he was gonna have a great year. I think he averaged about 6 points.
Yeah, no, I think it was definitely underwhelming. I think going
He's
into
not
the
playing tonight either.
nah,
Um,
he's been injured. Yeah, he
After he
broke his
goes
leg.
one for
Or
50, he was very underwhelming.
yeah, no, you're right. It was definitely underwhelming. I mean, the injury cut it short, which was
Underwhelming for sure.
yeah, no, you're right. But I
He's
mean,
shooting like 30% from three. But if they get him to step up next year, they go out and they get, you know, they maybe even play small ball. They put Bertans at the five. We've seen teams do that before. The Spurs used to try and do it sometimes. The Wizards have even done it. And then you go out and you get a guy like, or you could get a Jermichael Green and put him at center. He's a free agent. You get a guy like Bielitsa, who would be perfect for this team because they're in desperate need of shooting. You go pick up a Bielitsa, who's actually I don't think he's shooting that well this year, but he's a 3 point shooter nonetheless.
he's definitely capable
Um,
of it. Yeah.
yeah. We just have it down here. But, you go get some wing shooting.
Yeah, no,
Shit.
you're
To
definitely right
pair
about
with
that.
Beal and Westbrook and a legit third scoring threat. Because although Bertans, I mean, we've seen Bertans. Um, he's a good. He can get you 10 to 15 a game. But as a third option on a team with, at this point, the only aspirations they can have is championship aspirations because they don't really have a future. That's they need, you know, 18, 19 point per game third option on this team, and I don't think Davis Bertans can be that.
Yeah, well, I
So
mean,
whether
I
it's
yeah,
through a trade and they get, or even they try and somehow get Depot in the offseason, they'd have to pull off a sign and trade for that. Um, they get Depot, they can play him at the three. Maybe they try something like that. Um, there's not a lot of ways this team can go, and that's the scary thing is that they back themselves up against the wall because with Westbrook and Beal, although Beal's relatively young, I know we've said this for so long about Westbrook about how he's coming close to the end of his career, but at age, how old's Westbrook? 32, 33?
yeah, somewhere in there.
In, yeah, at age 32, 33,
Yeah, 32.
you gotta, with his play style, you have to expect that that decline comes sooner rather than later. Let's say we're generous and we give him up until 35. They've only got 3 years to figure this out, and they don't have a lot of assets to do that. So that's the scary thing for the Wizards is that they kind of put themselves in a position where it's hard for them to improve. But they've also gone so all in that they can't really just give up and trade Westbrook or Beal or any other piece of their core pieces.
Well, I mean, as much as I feel like there's been this expecting of Russell Westbrook going downhill, but I mean, I've always been a bit reluctant to think it's actually going to end up coming that soon because I mean, you've seen guys at his age, and I mean, as athletic, he's just so athletic, and I feel like it just feels at a certain point like almost unrealistic because I think everyone agrees that Russell Westbrook is an all-time great. Maybe I think he's yeah, like he is by he's an all time great. I think a first ballot Hall of Famer without a doubt. Just look at the impact on the game that he's had, and I mean, you look at guys who are like that, and the guys who have relied on their athleticism, who have been close to the top of the Hall of Fame ballot. I mean, not a lot of them have retired yet, and not a lot of them have hit that like stride because it's something I think that's fairly new to the game. But when you look at a guy like LeBron, he definitely hasn't regressed. I mean, he's definitely regressed physically, but not in like a super duper noticeable way in the sense that like his rebounds and assists and his speed has just fallen off because you can see him even at age 36 probably, and he'll probably do it for the next 2 or 3 years, that he'll just be able to be so elite athletically. I don't really know exactly how I'd put it, but like in the sense that he is just so able to do everything from an athletic standpoint that like at a certain point, I don't think the regression will come that soon. And then the other thing I think that's interesting to point out is that when you look at Russell Westbrook's past few stints, where he's been described as like, I guess he's been a bit described as like he's fallen off a bit. I mean, you look at his situation the past 3 seasons. This is going to be more or less what I heard from Max Kellerman, but I think it definitely is something I agree with. Is that so? In when he was coming into Oklahoma City, he loses Katie, and then he comes into a new situation with Paul George. They make the trade for Paul George. The season doesn't start off great, but by the end of the season, he's picking it up. Then they get ripped. The Thunder fans get their hearts ripped out by Damian Lillard, and one of the most amazing performances in playoff history from Dame. And then the next season he gets traded. With that when they blow that whole thing up, and then he gets sent over to Houston. I think everyone agrees that it was really underwhelming. We thought the regression was going to happen right then, right when he got traded, and boom, it doesn't happen because you see him in the second half of the season. He just begins to he starts to fit in, and he just explodes, and it feels like he's a top 5 player in the league again. And then the third time he gets put in a new situation, he's ends up in Washington. We saw this season; it was an awful start to the year, and boom, now and it felt like it never happened again. He had one of the most impressive months in NBA history, where he was literally putting up video game numbers. That's not even an over exaggeration. That he was like it was like 18 assists a game, just casually, and like that was like just a tear for like 6 games, maybe, probably even more. Like I think the entire month of May, he's been averaging over 15 assists, over 13 rebounds, and over 25 points or something like that. Around there, I'd say. And it's just amazing to see him be able to do these types of things, even at 32. And I mean, you just wonder if you put him in this situation in Washington for another year. I wonder how much his relationship can grow with Bradley Beal and with the rest of this team, and how he can really, if he can really maximize his potential as a player for the first time in a few years.
I think the thing with Westbrook is that he's one of those guys. He wears the chip in his shoulder. He's got the Michael, the Kobe, the I'll even dare to put Jimmy in that category. I love you, Jimmy. Um, of he truly lets the hate fuel him. He buys into the hate, kind of like he doesn't do it the way LeBron does, where LeBron will openly play it up. Um, Westbrook. It seems like Westbrook's fueled by the hate,
Yeah, I mean you're right. I'm really excited to see what they can do in the offseason. I really hope for the best for them. And now I think another thing that I wanted to touch on in this episode was the other game of the playing tonight, where it was
Oh yeah,
the 9 and 10 game. It was an absolute rout. The Pacers Hornets. Pacers win 144 to 117 in just a I got to watch a bit of the game. I didn't get to watch all of it, but oh my god, that was just it was an absolute rout. I mean, you had it was on Indiana side, it was just all offense. Sabonis had 14 and 9, 14 points, 9 assists, and 21 rebounds. O'Shea Brissett had 23 points, 5 assists, 5 boards, 2 assists. Brogdon came in with 16 points and 8 assists. He's been out recently, I think, with a hamstring injury, and he finally came back tonight to put up an amazing performance. I think I wrote a bit before the game how like he was going to be a key if him and Sabonis were both playing. I thought it would be pretty much a surefire win for the Pacers because I was going to say, Brogdon, he's really got a chance to lock up LaMelo Ball, and he held him to 2 of 4, 2 of 6 from three and 4 of 14 from the field. Just straight lockup performance, a total of 14 points, and he had a plus minus of -35. LaMelo Ball, just an absolute horrendous game for him. It was horrendous right off the bat for Charlotte, and it was downhill from the start, and it just never went back up, which is disappointing because I mean I think a lot of people would have loved to see LaMelo Ball in the playoffs, but then on the flip side, I'm excited to see the Pacers keep going and fight for a playoff spot, which I think with if you take injuries off of this team's season, they ultimately deserve.
yeah. I mean, I think the Pacers, they're still a team that's kind of slept on. You could say injuries, you could say underperformed. Um, Probably a little mix of both. I think they had some injuries, but they still underperformed with what they had left. Um, as we know, they're missing Miles Turner, they're missing Karis LeVert, Wilson, they're missing tonight, T.J. Warren and Jeremy Lamb. Those are probably four of their best players, four of their core at least. And they come in and they win by would they win by like 37, I think 27, 37.
Let me just do
They
some
win by
math here, but yeah,
about
it's a
30
lot.
points. Yeah, and it just goes to show that um, I think the Pacers have one of the best systems in the league. Um, just through coaching, through development. Um, the Pacers for the last, we'll say, 4 or 5 years have always been a quiet playoff team. Um, and I think it comes through a lot of the time unlikely performances. They go out and they get these guys. T.J. McConnell has been huge for them all year. I think T.J. McConnell's a really underrated player. He's an amazing playmaker. He almost averages as many assists as he does points. He's an unreal defender. Don't even get me started on his defense. But also tonight, I mean, a lot of it in garbage time. But Goga comes in. Everybody loves Goga. Comes in, has a great game, puts up a double double, 14 and 10. And Malcolm Brogdon, who is he on? He's on minutes restriction right now, right?
Yeah, I would think so because he's coming out
Yeah,
of the
he's on a
injury.
minutes restriction. He only seemed like he played 15 or 20 minutes. Actually, yeah, he played 21 minutes. Puts up 16 points, does his thing. 6 for 10, 3 for 5 from the three, very efficient like usual. They get Dougie McBuckets. Uh, Doug McDermott steps up, 7 for 9, 21 points. I think they have a lot of scoring options on this team, which is the big issue that teams like we were saying, like the Celtics face
Yeah, no, you're definitely right about that. I mean, I think the issue. I mean, you're. I'm definitely excited um, for the Hornets next season. But I think the huge issue with them in this playoff game was you look at the roster and it's probably like their playoff experience is probably limited to maybe a few
A
games,
couple of years.
maybe
Yeah.
a few games from Brad Wanamaker.
Actually,
Brad
yeah,
Wanamaker
I was
from his
gonna say I don't
Warriors.
know if he didn't even play. I
I
think
mean, yeah,
Biombo is
no.
the only
Well,
guy
no,
with
he
real
probably.
playoff experience.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Biombo when he was on the Raptors, but that's about it. Or maybe Cody's no, Cody's Ellis never been in the playoffs.
I mean,
But
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
like I think they lack that veteran leadership for sure. What was Gordon Hayward? No, he's out. Eh?
well, yeah, exactly. That was the
Yeah,
other
he's
thing. I
out.
mean, Gordon Hayward's been out for a
That's the other
while.
big thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you
Yeah,
put him in this game. I think Pacers lose. I think if Gordon Hayward plays, the Pacers lose this game. But
yeah.
yeah,
I
because I
think
mean, the Pacers just
it's
don't have
not
a lot of great wing
that
defense. So
like he's not a 27-point difference alone, but you just add that veteran leadership in this playing setting. I think a lot of the nerves for the young guys, because I think that's what a lot of that is that these young guys have never sniffed the playoffs, um, and they're coming in and they're being led by. I was gonna say Lamelo, but Miles Bridges looks like the best player on this team. They're being led by Miles Bridges, in their first ever playoff appearance. Miles Bridges and Terry Rozier with Lamelo. You bring in a guy like Gordon Hayward, and I think this game could have gone a lot differently. But side note, um, you know Lamelo Ball's middle name is LaFrance.
I think I've heard that. I don't think I guess I'm remembering it now. It's in a.
Lamelo LaFrance. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was looking at his basketball reference. But yeah, yeah, there's not even really a lot to say about this game. You know, it was a lot of good from the Pacers and a lot of bad from the Hornets, and it's kind
yeah.
of just we'll have to wait and see if 144 points out of the Pacers. Um, if they can put that up against the Celtics, or sorry, against the Wizards, especially seeing as the Wizards struggled to score today. They had 100 points today, which in the modern NBA is like 80, 80 maybe 85 points. It's equivalent to. Um, if they can put that up consistently in the playoffs, I think they can make a deep run. If that offense keeps clicking for them.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're definitely right. I mean, I think I'm really excited to see what the Hornets can do next few years. I want to see how they build this team now that they've got this playing experience, and then I'm really looking forward to the Pacers Wizards game. It's definitely going to be a fun game to watch. You're going to have two teams who really want to make the playoffs, go head to head, and it's going to be an A spot. That I don't think either of them will get more than 6 games on the Sixers, but I don't really think that's gonna matter to them just because like you have two teams that they like the playoffs is just like such a big that feat is like just so it's amazing to have, and it's not something you're gonna pass up on to get a lottery pick. This isn't a game people tank in. This is a game that people say, oh yeah, we got to win this. We got to make the playoffs at all costs, and especially when you've got guys like Sabonis going at it, and you got guys like Russell Westbrook. I mean, Sabonis, Brogdon. I don't really think the Pacers stand much a chance if Westbrook is able to get going.
No,
But if he's not really at his peak and he's not really able to have the bounce back game that I think can be expected, I wonder what will happen because if that's not able to happen, then I worry for the pace. I worry for the Wizards because I don't think Beal is enough, especially if he's going to be being guarded by even though he's going to be guarded by what Doug McDermott or O'Shea Brissett. I don't really know what he's going to get done just because I'm not convinced that Beal is going to be able to perform at that level throughout the entire game. And if he's not able
I
to,
don't think. Yeah,
if he's not able to perform at the highest level possible, it's going to be a bad. It's going to be really bad for the Wizards.
yeah. I don't think Beal's dropping 50 tomorrow in a playing game against the Pacers. So they're gonna need a lot
Yeah, I mean, once you have that loss of wing depth for the Pacers, I mean, you've got so many opportunities with the injuries to Lamb, the injuries to Levert, the injuries to Warren, and then you can bring in guys like Brissett. You get Doug McDermott on board, and he comes up with a big game as well, just like a lot of big games. And then Shea Brissett, he just has a lot of easy buckets, and I think that's the other thing that I think is like a huge part of this team is that Doug McDermott, O'Shea Brissett, Doug McDermott, O'Shea Brissett, Justin Holiday. A lot of these guys are scoring because guys like TJ McConnell and Malcolm Brogdon are giving them such easy shots. Like Malcolm Brogdon, he's so good at really setting up guys in like the perfect spots to get easy buckets. Same with Sabonis, and then I think it even more so McConnell. He's just really, really, really good at like creating the right plays with the right players, and he knows what he has in mind. It just takes him a quick second to do it. He'll ramp around defenses just to get the ball in a very specific spot, and he just knows. He just has such a high basketball IQ. I remember I got to see the Knicks play the Pacers earlier this year, and it was just such a. He's really so good because he does so much stuff to like really set his teammates up in the most perfect positions possible, and it just works so well.
The Knicks probably smoked, or the Pacers probably smoked them, didn't they?
No, the Knicks smoked. I mean, I don't remember the exact score. I think
Oh,
it was
was
like
that the one in February or January?
I think it was in February.
Oh, okay, yeah, Knicks won.
Yeah, yeah, no, Knicks.
um,
I for the games that I have been to the Knicks have been in this year that I've been to, it's been good. It's been very quality basketball to say the least. A lot good man
yeah,
Knicks
let me
wins.
guess. I haven't got to see much of that from my team recently. But on to the plan in general. Um, I also want to start. I I can't see the NBA doing away with the plan now because it's a money thing, right? That extra viewership they're covering for the loss money from last year, and I get that. It just doesn't feel right. Um, it feels like a soccer gimmick. Like you have these teams, like it feels like a like not a relegation, but like a promotion like battle. Like they're battling it out like for the bottom two spots in the Champions League or something. Like it just doesn't feel like real basketball. Um, it's cool for the game though. It encourages more competition. Um, because now you have those instead of those 11, 12 seeds just being like, okay, let's go for the first pick. Now all those 11, 12 seeds are making trades, like you saw the Bulls go out and get Vucevic to try and make a push for the playing game. So it does bring more competition to the league, but I just think um, another question: Do these their stats? Do these count as playoff stats or regular season stats? Do you know?
I actually don't know, and it's something I think I've been wondering as well. Like,
That's
yeah, like
because
also another thing
playoff
I'm wondering.
records could be set here.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing I'm wondering is you look at like you look. I mean, you look at Tatum, yeah, a record setter or a hopeful record setter at least. And then I mean, the other thing that you can look at is well, shit, I forgot what I was thinking. Oh yeah, no, 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 I remembered, I remembered. So I mean, if you look at a guy like Curry, right, and in the context of the MVP debate, I think a big question has been if does this count for Curry being MVP? Does Curry MVP case does it count for do the playing games count? I guess that's what I'm asking because if you
That
think
would be a
about
fair
it,
one.
because if you're thinking about it, then the playing games and he does just some insane stuff in the playing games and does that count towards his MVP case, or does he kind of like, or is everything settled at this point? Because I don't think it'll be very often that we'll have an MVP
Well,
candidate at this point, but or like in the play-in. But it's a question that I think has to be asked.
I think that if we want to, well, first of all, actually, we'll get into the MVP right after this. Um, but I think if we're going based off how the MVP has always been awarded, a player who's in play-in territory or 7 to 10 seed shouldn't even be considered if we're going on how we've always handed it out
Yeah, no, I definitely get what you mean. I think it's definitely it's a question that has to be asked if it really counts. But I mean, I mean I don't really think it would matter that much because I don't really think Curry's that much of an MVP candidate, anyways. I mean,
Plus, I'll say if he legitimately drops, if he drops 70, 80 points, and they go into a shootout with the Lakers and they win by like five, and he drops 70 or 80, and that pushes them into the playoffs, I'd sign off on a Steph Curry MVP 100%. If
I
he could
mean,
do that. If he had one of
yeah.
the greatest performances of all time in this playoff game, but then again, is this the playoffs or is this a regular season? I'd consider it the playoffs, but
I mean,
I
I
don't
kind of
know.
feel like
But does
when
that
it's
mean the Hornets were a playoff team? Is this is considered a playoff game, right?
I mean, I personally think playoff team. I think the question has to be asked if the team is a playoff caliber team, and I think if you make the play in, then you're a playoff caliber team. But I think the
Yeah.
even more, I guess, pressing question. Probably, I'm probably not pressing, but I mean, the question that I think also is going to be something that I guess I want to answer is like, you know, with the Warriors and Curry situation, like, could it be its own third thing? Like, could the play in be? Is it not playoffs, or like would playing count, but it wouldn't be the regular season because there are implications in this game that just do not happen in the regular season ever because as much as the record differentiates, you could have a 7 seed playing a 10 seed in the second game, and those two teams could be varying a lot in skill, and you could still have an upset. And I mean, it's just like a lot of things could happen in the play-in. You just don't know. I mean, I feel like it's gotta have its own special circumstances where it's the Warriors aren't, or at least the play-in counts towards MVP and MIP and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily count. But it doesn't count towards playoffs.
Yeah, I think that another thing with the play-in, right, as you said, um, you mentioned, the seven can upset the 10 can upset the seven even if there's a huge skill gap. The thing with this plan is that you can have a team. If we look at the East, I'll pull up the East standings. The East has been relatively weaker for a long time. You look at the 10 seed in the East was the Hornets at 33 and 39, and the 7th seed Celtics 36-36. You can have a team that they're sitting 14 seed most of the season, but the bottom of the East is so bad that they go on a 3-4 game winning streak to end the year, and they get hot, and then they win two lucky games in a row in the plan, and all of a sudden they're a playoff team that should be getting the whatever the 12.5% chance at the first pick. Um, and now they're getting swept by the one seed, and it's a free series basically for the one seed. Um, I feel like they should have kept it the way they did it last year, where they had just the 8 and the 9 seed in the plan, um, and it was the kind of double elim for the 8 seed. If you remember what that was, if you
Yeah,
saw the
yeah,
game,
yeah.
how they had the 9 seed would have had to beat the 8 seed twice. I wouldn't have minded though if they did. Um, they could have done 7 versus 10 and 8 versus 9 in that double elim little thing. Um, I would have preferred to see the double elim though, versus some team coming in from the 13th seed on a winning streak, get really hot, um, beat one team who is on a losing streak, um, only beat them once, and then have to come in and only beat another team once. I think if you're preparing, um, especially as the higher seed, if you're preparing for a lower seed, um, and you have the advantage of only needing to win one game where they have to win two, I give that a 98% win chance. And although you question why you have the plan then, um, there always still is the chance for the upset. But right now, it kind of just feels like a March Madness soccer kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I personally have always been a bit pro play, and I really think it's just like such an interesting type of tournament to like decide who's getting in. And I feel like a lot of times you'll obviously, yeah, you can have a team that gets really hot at the end of the year, but also at a certain point, there's, I feel like, something that I've kind of noticed, especially with the standings, especially this year. And I mean, you look at the Eastern Conference, you kind of like, at least win wise, you almost have like a tier list where like you have this top tier of teams which go up until
The top
the
three.
well, I mean, yeah, you get the top three. Then I guess you got the.
I wouldn't put the Knicks in there because
I mean, well,
you
you've
know
got. I mean, you. I guess you got like your top three, which is like anything above 45. Then you've got like your middle tier, which is around 40. Then you've got your your second middle tier, which is the playing teams, and then you go down to the Bulls, Raptors, Cavs, Magic, and Pistons. And I mean, I think which is, it's kind of interesting because you kind of get the chance to let the teams differentiate between who's going to make the playoffs and who isn't, because all these teams are split by a 3 game difference. Like the Hornets were only 3 games worse than the Celtics. 3 games is not a lot, and I mean, you turn 3 games completely differently. Hell, you even turn 4 games completely differently at this point, and the Bulls could be right now at the 8 seed if you just switch the result of 4 different games. I mean, 4 games at this point it becomes so close. So you turn it down to 1 game, and I actually think it means a lot. So I really do think that it means a lot for the players, and I think it means obviously a lot for league revenue. But I do think it really just adds a different layer of competitiveness, where even these teams that aren't necessarily going to be in the playoffs, they still get the chance to kind of, like, prove their worth, even if it's not going to amount to much. It kind of gives these guys a bit more playoff experience. It gives the guys like on the Hornets young core, it gives them the chance to get some playoff experience, and I think it's just all around. It really works for everyone. I don't really see a team who this works against, because if you're put in this situation and you feel like it's unfair, then win. That's just the criteria for it.
and I think when you go back to because there's been a few players I know, not just LeBron, who come up and LeBron publicly said, can I quote LeBron exactly? Or no, I'll censor it.
Yeah, you can.
LeBron goes, can I quote him exactly
Yeah, you can call him for sure.
on this? Okay. So LeBron goes word for word. Whoever came up with that shit needs to be fired. I get it because um, you saw the Lakers slide in the standings when he got hurt, and so it affects him a little more than some others. Uh, so I get where he's upset from, but I guess from a player's perspective, I think that the guys, how would I even phrase it? I think the guys that are used to kind of willing and working their way for absolutely everything. Not that LeBron hasn't, but not to the extent. LeBron's not. When you think about LeBron, he's not the go get it and go grind for it kind of guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think when it comes to these hard nosed guys who are playing in these 9, 10, 11 seeds, um, it is some extra motivation, but it's also a chance to prove themselves for these young guys in these playing games. Even if you know that your team playoffs, it's a chance to come out and prove and say, I can do this for you in these big moments. Like you see, O'Shea Brissett today came out, dropped 23 in the playing game, um, and he comes out and it's a chance for him to say, I'm that guy. And I think that this is something that the NBA will continue for a long time, which I don't think LeBron will like. I also think Q Rich said something about it in an interview about how he thought it was gimmicky. But I mean, if it helps the league, if it makes the league more competitive, gets more teams trying to push into the playoffs, but also helps the league viewership wise and revenue wise. As a basketball fan, I don't see how you can be 100% against it when it's helping the league out, helping the league grow.
Yeah, I mean, it really it helps the league out a lot. Like I think I think it's creating interesting points Like it's really just creating interesting games like Warriors Lakers to see who makes the seventh seed and plays the Suns. No one expected to see that, but it looks like we're gonna see it. So honestly, props to the league then because that's gonna be such an interesting game to watch tomorrow night. Lakers Warriors. And winner gets the Suns. Loser won't have to win another game just to stay in the playoffs. And we're gonna have even whole MVP awards possibly based off of it if Curry ends up doing something Curry. So, I think it really will be an interesting point for teams to like, make I guess adjustments, make like fake playoff games. I don't really know how it would be like a perfect scenario for teams necessarily. There are tons of different examples that can be used, but like, I really think a lot of teams will benefit from this. And I mean, a lot of teams will not benefit from this. I mean, for example, if the Wizards lose tomorrow night, I think you probably would have been better off just taking the route to not do the play and play the Sixers in the playoffs. But if you deserve to play the Sixers in the playoffs, you just need to win one game if you're the 7 or 8 seed, and if you're the 9 or 10 seed, you just need to win two. Simple as that. Like it feels just like, and it feels like an added layer, and it feels, and why do we have to win two instead of one? We were just one. Like for example, the Wizards and the Pacers, they were tied this season. I would assume that the Wizards had the tiebreaker because they were the 8 and the Pacers were the 7. But if you think you're that much better than the Wizards, then just win an extra game. And obviously, it's a tall task, but you know that's kind of it. Kind of is, there's something that comes with that. Like if you don't think you can do it, if you can't do it, then just don't do it because the playoffs are where the best teams play, and if you're not one of the best teams, then you shouldn't be here. There's a place for you, and that's called the draft lottery.
I think actually before we can go to MVP. So before we go to that, what are your predictions for tomorrow night?
My predictions. I think I had an article about this earlier today. So my prediction for the Warriors game is I've got the Lakers today coming in, or tomorrow. I've got the Lakers coming in with the victory. I just really think that they can cruise to that one, just because as good as Curry, as good as Curry is, he'll have a good game. He'll have a huge game as usual. But as long as it's not like an 80-point game, it'll be a very easy win for the Lakers. I think it's just simply too overpowering for the Warriors defense and really for any defense for that matter. But I mean, if Draymond Green can have a big defensive impact, I think the Warriors could just pull a win right out of their hats in a close game. But who really knows? It'll definitely. I think it'll come down to the wire just because of how good Curry is and how much he can stay in games. But nonetheless, I think the Warriors will end up falling in this one.
Yeah, I think the big question is, you know, who on that team could guard LeBron or AD? And I mean, you say Draymond Green, that's great. You put Draymond on one, and who guards the other? Um,
Exactly.
unless every single role player has a terrible game, I don't see any way the Lakers lose this one. But I wouldn't put it past Steph to somehow pull it off. Even if he does, no matter what happens, I still see the Lakers and the Warriors being those final two playoff teams. I don't think the Grizzlies or the Spurs can put up much of a fight against either team, but I do um I actually think the Spurs can pull this off against the Grizzlies. I'd pick the Grizzlies to win, but I wouldn't be one bit surprised if the Spurs came out with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing with the Grizzlies is it's Ja Morant. He's so good, and I just wonder if I wonder if Ja Morant is gonna be able to,
You're still on the
if
jaw
he
train.
what?
You're still on the jaw train.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as much as I love him. I mean, I don't think he's gonna be. I'm on the jaw train in the sense that I think he's really good and he has a ton of potential. And I mean, he's playing extremely well recently. But you got Dejounte Murray on him. It's not an easy task, but Dejounte Murray has a good chance of being able to limit Ja. And combine this with efficient performance from DeMar, and I think the Spurs have a chance at taking on the Warriors and losing. I
I
think
think
that's
the
I think it's
Spurs.
like the I think at this point just like the winner gets the punishment of getting destroyed by the Warriors, but you know it can't be that bad a punishment. You know, it's basketball.
I think that also with the Spurs, with DeRozan coming to the Spurs, I think it's kind of just proven how great of a franchise the Spurs are and how great their coaching and development is. You look at DeRozan, the Raptors. DeRozan was a scorer. That was what he did. That was all he did. Um, you could depend on him for 20 a game. Well, in his prime, he was one season I think he had 27 a game. DeRozan was always a guy you could depend 20, 25 a game. But now you're looking at this guy and he's averaging like 7 assists. As a guy who was never seen as a playmaker before, and he's become a bit more efficient. His shooting's still, I don't know why, but all of a sudden he got San Antonio and he couldn't shoot anymore at all. Not that he was a great shooter before, um, but I think that if DeRozan has a great game and Dejounte Murray locks down John Morant, I think if at that point it's basically DeRozan versus Jaren Jackson, I think DeRozan can, with playmaking and scoring combined, I think he can contribute more than Triple J can. And I could see the Spurs coming out on top. It's all about that defensive matchup, though.
Yeah, it's definitely going to boil down to that for sure. I think as long as Dejounte Murray can have a good game and DeMar DeRozan can play pretty well, then be I think it'll be a very easy win for the. I think it'll be a very easy win for the Spurs, but that's a lot to rely on. And I mean, DeMar DeRozan has not been the most consistent this season, and neither has the rest of the Spurs team. So if they're not able to be consistent enough, that'll be an issue. But then I think the other flip side to this that I think could be a big issue for the Grizzlies is they don't have a huge amount of playoff experience on that roster. And I mean, DeMar DeRozan definitely has playoff experience, and then Coach Pop. I think it's like the ultimate. If you want experience, you go to Coach Pop. So that's going to be, I guess, a bit of that. That's going to be, I think, one of the biggest issues for the Grizzlies is just that coaching advantage. Taylor Jenkins is a good coach, but how good compared to Pop? Not that good because it's Pop, arguably one of the best coaches of all time. So I mean, yeah, I think that's my reason for the Spurs. But I think ultimately John Moran is just going to be able to rip through this defense of the Spurs as long as he's able to just get past Dejounte Murray because as easy as a task it might seem to guard John Moran, it's really not.
I mean, yeah, Joe Morant's a little ridiculous. But, yeah, I guess that's all I got really for those two. Do you want to move on to the MVP?
I'd love to. I mean, so I think we're both on the same page for the MVP. I've got Nikola Jokic right now. I think without a doubt. Would you agree with that?
Uh, I think, well, I guess with Embiid being out so long, LeBron being out so long, I just don't think there's anybody else you can really give it to. I'm not really gonna. I mean, I already kind of talked about why I don't think it should be Steph. I think you agree for the same reason. Seeding's always been a big thing. If he was averaging 40 and they were, like if he was putting up like crazier than James Harden numbers and they were in the playing game, I'd have no issue with him getting it. But I just don't see anybody else who is, especially with Jamal Murray going down, and then the Nuggets went 9-1 there in their first 10 games without Jamal Murray. I think Nikola Jokic showed exactly how valuable he is to this team, and I just don't think there's anybody else you can put above him.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like there's the tier one guy in Jokic where you've got he's really 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 good. He's been amazing this season, and I think just amazing stats. He hasn't missed a single game, whereas I think a lot of players have. And he's in the playoffs. Which is, I think the other thing, it's like there are a lot of guys who would be very good, who are very good candidates, but just none of them meet every single requirement, which is something Nikola Jokic pretty much does. and that's kind of why, like, I guess you almost have to put him in for as the MVP. I mean, I would love to see a guy like Chris Paul or Julius Randle win it, but with a guy as good as Jokic, there's really no way for any other player to be the MVP this season.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's not a very long discussion really for me. I think Nikola Jokic is the MVP. It's not really close. He's averaging what 26, 11, and 8. Um, he was he was looking like he's going to shoot 50, 40, 90. He slipped under that a little bit, and I just think it's a pretty quick and easily wrapped up discussion when it comes to the MVP this year. I
Yeah,
think
I
Jokic
mean,
might win. I don't think he'll get unanimously. I think there'll be 5 or 6 step votes, but it'll be pretty damn close throughout the media.
yeah, I mean, as much as I want Curry to really be close, I just don't think it's very realistic that he's anywhere near it because of the whole winning factor. And I mean, it really sucks because you put Clay Thompson on this team, and yeah, they're winning without a doubt. But then again, you put Clay Thompson on this team, and Warrior and Curry stats, they probably go down a bit, and it's no longer that much of an MVP, season. But as much as I want, Clay to be healthy, I mean, as much as I want Curry to be an MVP candidate, I want Clay to be healthy much more, and it's just not. I would rather have a healthy Clay than Curry just be that much closer to the MVP. So sucks to suck for Curry, but he just won't be able to be MVP another time in his career, at least in my opinion, just because he's aging. And I don't really. I think guys like Jokic, guys like Luka, maybe AD will have another one in him. Guys like Embiid will all be much closer to MVP in the next few years, and especially when I have a feeling when you look at the next 10 games of the season, you probably have Embiid playing them, probably have LeBron playing them, and it looks a lot better for their MVP cases, but not for Jokic, but not necessarily for Jokic, just because he's been in most of them, and it doesn't really affect percentage wise. It just makes it a bit easier for the rest of them. So overall, I guess as much as I want Jokic, as much as I want Curry to have a chance to win a third MVP, just not realistic at this point in his career.
Have you seen the votes yet?
I have not, no.
Out of 34 confirmed first place votes, take a guess how many Nikola Jokic has.
How many? Let me see. I'm curious.
34.
Wow. I mean,
Nikola Jokic has every first place vote so far, and basically every second place that's been confirmed is Embiid. Curry has 4 second place confirmed. Embiid is. They've only confirmed 21 of the second place, but out of that, there's 15 for Embiid, 2 for Giannis, and 4 for Curry.
yeah, it's not. I think that
Um,
definitely has to be talked about. Giannis. I mean,
Julius Randle actually has a couple fifth place votes in here as well.
yeah, that's what I love to see. Oh yeah. Oh,
3-4 for Julius Randle, and Tony Jones of the Athletic, who, to no surprise, they're representing the Utah Jazz, has voted Rudy Gobert as his 5th candidate for the MVP.
oh
So that
yeah.
means that
I
he's
bet
over
you.
guys
I bet you'll
like
have a feel.
Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, Giannis, Steph, Chris Paul, LeBron James, Luka, Julius Randle. He has Rudy Gobert in 5th, and that's the only vote that he has confirmed. Wonder why.
I mean, at a certain point, I feel like Rudy Gobert needs some sort of very valuable recognition, but not top five in the league. I mean, that's just not realistic
I think
because,
it's a bit overstated
yeah.
because I'm kind of done with the Rudy Gobert thing. But there is also one confirmed here. It says Tim Reynolds is between Jokic and Embiid still, and hasn't submitted his.
That interests me. The whole like Embiid still having a chance thing, and I
I
mean, I don't know. I don't know if you got the chance to listen to Brian Windhorst talk about this on his podcast, where I think it was him with Tim Botemps and Tim McMahon, and they just went off on each other about the MVP, and Brian Windhorst was more or less complaining about how like, oh, it's so unfair to Embiid. You know, he's not really like it's not fair that because people are discrediting him because he missed a huge chunk of games, and then it was like. It got really heated at the end, and I think it was pretty interesting. I didn't get to see the full podcast, but the part that I did listen to was definitely a good segment. But I think a very interesting thing to look out for in voting in general, not necessarily just this year, but in general. I think one thing about MVP voting, like availability is the biggest is a huge factor. Like if you're not available, you can't be valuable. Like if you're there at least, you're bringing some sort of value, even if it's not your best game of the season, you're still being valuable by just showing up. And that's not something Embiid was able to do half the season or for a significant part of the season. And as much as I want Embiid to win the MVP, it just can't happen because he just has not shown up for enough of the season.
I think that this season proved a lot for me. I think if he played even 60 games, 60 out of 72, I think this award is his. And I think for a lot of people, um, this season has put Embiid above Jokic in the discussion of who's the best center in the league, Embiid or Jokic, which we even have him for the last two seasons. Um, Joel Embiid has been so dominant in the post, which is so rare to see nowadays. And I feel like Embiid's going to be a player that by the end of his career, he won't get the recognition he deserves among these all-time greats. But you look at Embiid play, and some people are going to scoff. He is Hakeem. Like Embiid is to the modern day Hakeem Olajuwon. Um, and I'm not going to get into how I stand on the evolution of the game and the competition he's playing now. But I think that Joel Embiid has proven throughout this season, in the last couple seasons, that he is an he has an all-time great skill set. Um, and as long as he can stay healthy, I think he can win a couple MVPs in his career and go down in the Hakeem. I don't think he'll be given the same recognition as guys like Hakeem, but I think this could be a top 20 player ever. Um, if he really lives up to everything and dominates the way he has been.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll all come down to health. I mean, it was so disappointing. I was watching his injury live, and I was shocked, and to be honest, I was completely disappointed because Embiid has such an amazing career ahead of him, and it would just suck so much to see it die or to see it at least fall short because of an injury like that. It was really a gruesome injury. His knee kind of just like bent backwards as he landed awkwardly, and it really sucked because Embiid, it's just gonna be really bad for Embiid for the rest of his career. And I mean, it ended up not being that bad, but it could have been much worse.
Uh, yeah, I mean that's all I really have on this. I don't know if you want to touch on anything else really.
Yeah, no, I think this
No,
is all.
another middle name fact. Joel Embiid's middle name is Hans, like the ski sharpening guy from Mighty Ducks, Hans. So there's your facts for the day.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I think I've got to wrap it up, but it was great recording. We'll definitely get more episodes in the future. And yeah, see you next time. Peace.